Welcome everyone to our Year in Fundraising webinar. We're so glad that you could join us today. For those of you who aren't too familiar with Surrey Group, I'll give you a brief introduction as to what we do. Our team leverages technology and strategy in tandem to help nonprofits achieve their goals. So from system selections to data integrity, CRM implementations, and fundraising strategy, we have expert in all areas of nonprofit operations. And today, we're going to share our most effective strategies to delight and dazzle your donors with a holiday giving campaign. My name is Amy Harney, and I'm a consultant at Surrey Group. I work with nearly all of the different teams here to support client projects and drive internal initiatives. On the call with us, we have our host, Carly Samuelson. Carly is a senior consultant at Surrey Group and by far one of the best fundraising strategists that I've ever had the pleasure of knowing. Carly specializes in building and implementing successful fundraising programs using peer-to-peer fundraising and donor stewardship. She's worked for a variety of organizations from the local and national level and is a true innovator in the nonprofit fundraising field. So we're really excited to share what she's learned throughout her career and particularly during this challenging year for fundraisers. On today's agenda, we'll talk through holiday giving in 2020 and how it's different from past years, a holiday giving donor journey, and the real meat here is the 5 must-dos for a successful campaign. We'll also go through how to build immediate connections that last with your donors and how to end 2020 with a bang. And we will have time at the end of this for Q&A as well. So if you have questions, feel free to use the chat feature in the webinar and we'll get those questions answered either throughout the session or at the end. And we definitely want this to be interactive, so please do pop your questions into the chat. And lastly, we have some session goals for today. We hope that you leave this session, of course, ready to listen to holiday music, confident that you can reach your fundraising goals this holiday season, and armed with tips, tools, and actionable steps to solidify your holiday giving plan. And now I'll turn it over to Carly to share her insights on boosting year-end fundraising.
Hey, Amy, thanks so much. And hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar today. Before we dive in, Amy, just give me an audio check. You can hear me, you can see me. Things are looking good on your side, right?
Things look fantastic, Carly.
Awesome. I always like to do that. So, hey everyone, and welcome. Amy's was a very, very sweet intro from Amy about being a fundraising strategist, but it is why I am here. It is what I do at Surrey Group, and it's what I love the most is working with clients and with organizations of all types and sizes to maximize the amount of money that you raise so that first and foremost, you can continue your wonderful missions, but also too, so that you can build great relationships with your donors. And so I'm really excited to be spending a little bit of time talking to you today about holiday giving, and especially in 2020. So for those of us who've been fundraisers for multiple years, I have worked as a fundraiser for over 20 years. So I've been through many, many holiday givings, and as we all know, the holiday season is what we like to say the most wonderful time of the year. And within holiday giving in your organization, that is no exception, because it's likely that you're going to raise a lot of money between now and the end of 2020. But as we all know, we are sitting in an unprecedented year. So it's also likely that you've been in a place where you're wondering, what is holiday giving going to look like in 2020? What do we need to be doing this year to push and promote our campaigns? A lot of you are probably trying to make up a deficit as well. So this is a really, really important time. So let's take a look at the holiday giving timeline. We all know very well it starts and kicks off with Giving Tuesday, which this year happens to be December 1st. And then it sprints all the way through to the end of the year, literally December 31st, 2020. this is your holiday giving timeline. If you're like me, I live in Austin, Texas, and I'm not sure where y'all live, but I went into my local Target the other day and it's already holiday giving season. And so I can buy Christmas trees, I can buy, all the decor for parties. And so I was walking around and being like, I don't know if it's just 2020, but here it is, in our face sooner. But it was a great reminder that this is coming up. And what I'd like to say about this year's holiday giving, I'm laughing because I know the analogy that I'm about to use, is I feel like holiday giving is a NASCAR race. If anyone's ever been to a NASCAR race, I have. And I feel like when I was thinking about the holiday giving timeline and what it takes to prep and prepare, it is a lot like a NASCAR race. You're working right now probably on your holiday giving campaign. This is the pre-work. This is all the stuff that's going to make that car go fast, that's going to make that car go be the winner, and hit its maximum capacity. That's where we sit right now, and that's what you guys are likely doing. But if you haven't started yet too, that is something that hopefully today all the topics and tips we'll discuss will help you get there as well. But then once we hit that start line, Giving Tuesday, we are off to the races, people. And it's a round to track, and it's constant communication and constant messaging and constant engagement with your supporters all the way through until the finish line. And then what I like to call the pit stops in the middle are these times in between Giving Tuesday and the new year where you're reminding your donors how important the need is, and also, reminding where they can go to donate, engaging on social media, et cetera, et cetera. 2020 is going to be a holiday giving season like no others. And as I'm sure 2020 has been a year unlike any others we've seen in recent history. And with holiday giving, this is no different. Holiday giving for 2020 is going to be stiff competition. If you haven't already sort of seen in your industry or in your type of fundraising, the everybody is fundraising right now. Everybody is most likely working on a deficit where they haven't hit as much money as they maybe thought they would for 2020. And this is the time of year where every organization, every type of charitable giving entity is going to be working really hard to capture that last minute donor, to get the 2020 money in the door, and to really, really make this holiday giving season spectacular. So the competition is real stiff. And as you prepare to launch your giving campaign, it's really important to remember that. So today we're going to talk a lot about the tips and the tricks and things that you can remember and incorporate into your planning that really helps you stand out among the crowd. But this year, 2020, unlike any other year of holiday giving, this is going to really shed a light on who your superstar supporters are. Obviously, after a year like we've had, where we've seen, where a lot of people are in different places than they were last year, you can feel it on a local level or on a national level. We're just in a different place. And so when somebody this year makes a donation to your organization on their holiday giving campaign, that is somebody that needs to be recognized, that needs to be lauded, and that really, really needs to be told by you as an organization that they matter to you. So this year is going to be, I love this little girl on this slide, like popping out like a superhero. I think that this is how I feel like what you're going to see with your donors. They're going to pop out like superstars. And this year, unlike a lot of other years, perhaps, or maybe like a lot of other years, everyone is a potential giver within your organization. So when I work with our clients here, we do a lot of strategy on audiences and who is in your database and what's the potential of those people in your database. 2020, like any other, is a really, really great opportunity to go back to that database and to look through who is in there, what has their past giving history been with your organization, and how can you engage them for 2020. Your donors for this year are already in your CRM, most likely. They just have to be pulled out. And so, as you are looking to prepare and prep your plan, remember these things. The competition's stiff this year. A lot of people are asking for a lot of money. Anyone that gives to you is going to be your top level superstar supporter, no matter whether they give $10 or $10,000. And everyone in your database is a potential giver. This might be a blast from the past, which is what I call a lapsed donor. They have a lot of great other names for them, but I like to call them a blast from the past. This might be a peer-to-peer fundraiser who hasn't done another fundraiser in a year or maybe more, but they've loved your organization at one time enough to raise money for you. It might be a volunteer, somebody who comes to all of your events and is there in person. But this year they want to turn their time and they want to make that into an actual donation. So leave no stone unturned and be ready to really, really communicate with everybody that you have accumulated over the years as donors. This brings us into journey planning. One of my favorite things about fundraising is the pre-work that it takes to set up a fundraising journey and all the great things that you can do that really, really help take your donors on through a storytelling situation where they get to learn a lot about your organization. So here, let's talk about holiday donor journeys. When I thought about a donor journey, I really wanted to be in this sled for some reason. And so that's why I liked this picture. I don't know why. I just feel like I want to go on a dog sled journey, but that's why that's here. But let's talk about the journeys you're going to be taking your donors and your constituents on. There's two types. The first is obviously your end of year strategy, that plan that you're probably sitting around with your web team and your social team and your ecom team and molding together. You probably have had your graphic design components already worked out, or you've had meetings about what your graphic design is going to look like for your 2020 campaign. And that is the most important journey that you are preparing for holiday giving. But I also, in thinking about what we were going to talk today about, wanted to remind or also bring to light the fact that there's more than just one journey that you should be preparing this year. The first and obvious one is how you're going to get to your year-end giving goals. But the second journeys that you're preparing are all of the great ways that you are going to engage your different donor sets after they give you that donation. This is part of the plan for 2020 that I think is very, very important. Again, you'll hear the theme over and over again. Superstar supporters, anyone that gives to you right now is your most loyal donor. And so you want to roll out the red carpet for them on the flip side. And your donor journeys help you do that. So we'll dive into a little bit of each one. Let's first talk about the end of year strategy. We've highlighted the weeks of holiday giving this year, and because Giving Tuesday starts on December 1st, we have a little bit shorter of a window for holiday giving. Sometimes it's 6 weeks, sometimes it's 5 weeks, and this year. December is the time. We kick it off, and then it's straight racing until the end of the year. And again, as I've said, this falls on top of a lot of really, really important stuff, not just for our country, but also for the holiday season in general, which traditionally is really stacked with opportunities to intermingle with your friends and family, to celebrate the time, to relax. So there's going to be a lot of going on in December. You need a long runway for your end of year strategy planning and then also execution. especially for 2020, because we're sitting in this time where messaging matters, and with what you're saying and what you're doing and how you're communicating to your donors is is of the utmost importance. And so you need a long runway to plan this. As I mentioned from the beginning, if you haven't started your end of year strategy, it is definitely time to get on that. If you have started your end of year strategy and you're in the middle of planning, hopefully today's webinar is going to shed some great lights that you can add in. Or if you're one of those charities, which is like, or one of those groups, which is like, oh my gosh, this has just snuck up on us, we haven't started. Not to fear. Today's webinar is also going to help, but we also have great strategists like myself at Surrey Group that can really sit down with you and make your planning work for you. So, critical message to get across here is that you should have an end of strategy plan in place, end of year, excuse me, strategy in place. But if you don't yet, don't worry. Your end of your strategy plan has to be multi-channel, obviously, and I think most people do this regardless, but 2020 especially, we have really embraced the virtual digital world, more and more so as we've gone through the months. And so now more than ever, a year-end strategy has to be multi-level and multi-channel. It's got to stack on top of each other in order to, be that constant reminder that what you do is great work. The money that you raise is critical, and the clients or the people that you serve need their help now more than ever. So likely, your end of your strategy includes a direct mail campaign. Most likely, because I've worked in direct mail before, that planning is already finished. In fact, I'm sure end of year campaigns are probably in the process of being put together to hit inboxes very shortly, soon. So your direct mail campaign is likely in play already, and it really provides you that structure to know when to execute the rest of your plans. So your drop date, the date that it's going to hit your if you have a direct mail campaign, the date that that's going to hit your mailboxes, that's your start date for your strategy. And then layered on top of it are things like e-com. Likely, you're going to kick off your e-com a couple of days before Giving Tuesday. My personal recommendation is to send out a reminder about Giving Tuesday coming up about a week before, just because the end of the week will be the holiday automation as a part of their system, and creating a welcome series that introduces your audience to what you're doing right now, and introducing the audience to the organization is a really, really great piece of low-hanging fruit that you can set up for your holiday giving that is going to really delight and excite new potential donors. But don't forget about the other audiences that you have within your CRM. We're going to talk a little bit more about segmentation next, but let me talk about a few other segments that are really important to us this year. First and foremost, 2019 givers. I don't think I have a visual representation of this on the slide, but anybody that gave last year needs to be receiving communication about giving again in 2020. And while that seems very simple and pretty obvious, you'd be shocked at how many people don't necessarily look at their immediate last year statistics when they send out new communication. So your 2019 givers are the very, very first place to start. They're already supporters of your organization. They've given in this time last year, so their annual year donorversary is coming up, and this is a really important time. So 2019 givers are a really, really great group to look at. But there's other people too. Lapsed donors, the we miss you, the come back to us. I am a huge, huge fan of lapsed donors as a segment for re-engagement. And I think that most organizations use lapsed donors, but they don't necessarily look at the full universe. But somebody has given to you at once, it opens the door of possibility that it could happen again. And you want to make sure you're capitalizing that. We're going to talk about how in the top 5 tips, but let's talk about the audiences we've got here. How about people who participate in your organization in another way? So remember, I was talking about those volunteers, but maybe also too, it's a past peer-to-peer fundraiser from your DIY program, or maybe it's an attendee of a symposium that, somebody that came to something that you hosted down the line, somebody who interacts with your organization on a regular basis, but maybe not financially. Those people are also really, really great groups of segments to reach out to ask for donations this time of year. So the idea that they're very, very loved within your organization right now, but why not try something new? It's a great messaging to give, and that's a wonderful segment and a wonderful donor journey to set up. And then obviously, you're always going to have the general engagement outpouring that says, we want you to come support us. This one we know very, very well. We're very well versed at creating donor journeys for people who we want to take action. But now is the time to look at creating some automation or creating some segmentation and direct communication to get to those people. So however you choose to set up your end of your strategy and also your donor journey, your thank you journey is going to be very, very important for 2020. As I said, there's going to be a lot of competition, and what is going to make you stand out as an organization? Obviously, it's the first part. It's the e-communication. It's your website look and feel. It's the ease of donation and donation form optimization. And that's a great, great place to make sure is 100% for this year. But don't forget about the after action. Don't forget about the stewardship opportunity that's going to be coming through as a result, because once again, these 2020 donors are your superstar supporters. And so you want to treat them as such. You want to make them feel as such. And in fact, we're going to talk a little bit more about stewardship of donors in 2020 in a few minutes. So now that we've talked about the journeys, and now we've talked about the type of people that you are going to be planning your holiday giving around, I have selected 5 things that you absolutely need to know about holiday giving in 2020. I would actually say these are the 5 things you absolutely need to do. But again, let's talk through them, and I hope you choose to do all 5. Number 1, segment your audience. This is going to be very critical for 2020. I am sure that a lot of organizations on the phone are segmenters already, and actually wanted to see, and Amy, you can help me with this. If you're on the call and you segment your audience, can you go ahead and pop into chat? Yes, we segment our audience. If you are on the call and you're like, we would love to segment our audience one day, go ahead and tell us that too. I'm doing a little mini poll on who segments their audience for communication and who doesn't. It's a fun little activity. Go ahead and tell us what you do. We won't judge. But for 2020, segmenting is a critical success factor. And I'm going to give you a use case study on this too. But let's talk about what segmentation means. Obviously, segmentation is taking your communication method from a one to all down to a one to few. But segmentation is really important this year because other critical email success factors center around personalization and the idea that the communication that you send, the donor feels connected to you in a way. And one of the best ways to get that done is through audience segmentation. If you're an organization that segments a lot, kudos and congratulations. You do know how much work it takes to segment email journeys, but you also know how rewarding it can be. If you're an organization that's just trying segmentation for the first time, I like to say start small. Um, and not by small audiences, but I mean, don't necessarily come out of the gate picking 7 to 10 segmentations that you're going to use. 2 to 3 would be wonderful to try for 2020. And remember what I was talking about, those journeys before, the donor sets, DIY fundraisers, lapsed donors, 2019 givers. Spoiler alert, y'all, those are great segments to be pulling into use. And so you can pick just a few of those segments and get started with it. And then crafting specific content and journey for each of these segments is super important. And I'm going to use a use case study. I have worked at Heifer International. I worked at Heifer International 2 holiday seasons ago. Heifer is a organization that raises a ton of money in their final few weeks. And I was working on a peer-to-peer program, and we chose to segment our audience. Our peer-to-peer audience was a little bit stale. They hadn't fundraised for a while, and we weren't sure if we were going to be able to re-engage them. And so the tactic we chose was to segment the audience. And I will tell you, I will sit here and say in hindsight, I was a very, I thought we were segmenting too much. It was a lot, the work was going to be a lot for what we were going to pre-produce, but I will also sit here and say I was 100% wrong. We segmented our audiences by type. So we chose whether you were a church or community group, or whether you were an individual, whether you were a community leader, and we spoke to each individual audiences. Tip from behind the scenes: most of our email journeys were exactly the same, no matter what segment you were. The difference was in a couple lines at the top of the email, that instead of just saying, thanks for being a donor, it said, thank you for your church groups, activities with Heifer International. You make a difference. And just by that adding of that little personalization, we increased our fundraiser numbers that year by 20%. And I think that that's it's an amazing result. We raised more money than our goal had. We raised more money than our goal. I was going to say our goal had suggested, but we raised more money than our goal, and we really re-engaged our audience. So segmentation has since then become one of my favorite things, something you need to do for 2020. Here's another one. You got to meet your audience where they are. And spoiler alert, they are online. Or maybe not spoiler alert after the year that we have had. But statistics are showing every single day that Americans are spending a considerable time in the digital media space, and mostly they are doing it on their mobile device. So if you notice here, almost 4 hours a day is spent in digital media of some sort. And that is exactly, almost to the minute, the same amount of time people spend on TV a day. So looking at these statistics, it's really clear to see that the online space is what your online journey for 2020 needs to be the best it's ever been, because this is where your people are. And also remember this: as you're executing your campaigns, your audiences are on social media, they're watching videos, they're attending virtual conferences, and they're getting really used to living in a digital environment, so much so that they're doing it for a large portion of their day. So meet your audience where they are, and they're online. Get your messaging straight is a really important factor for this year as well, more so than any other time. There's a lot that we need to be communicating right now as people. And in your holiday giving campaign, that is no different. But what is different in 2020 versus has been going on prior to 2020 is that right now messaging needs to be extremely relevant. I chose these 3 examples because mainly you'll see everybody is wearing masks. Masks are our reality right now. And so, actually even just seeing a photo of somebody wearing a mask kind of in our head says, okay, they're in the same place we are. They're working through the same things that we are. We need to help them just as much as we need to help everybody else. So, keeping your messaging and your imagery very focused on what's going on right now is really important for this year. Um, there's some other things that, I like to talk about under positive wording or you getting your message straight, and that is the importance of positivity this year. Even more so than any other year, you want to make sure that you are focusing your messaging on why there is an increase of needs for services versus we don't have enough money. And if you take a moment to look at those two messages, you can notice the positivity in, because of what's happening right now, we have an increased need to feed our community and we need your support. That sounds a lot different in email and to people than, guess what? We have a budget deficit this year and we won't be able to serve the community like we had wanted to. So please help us. It's the same, it's a very similar messaging. It's just said differently and it is way more positive. At the end of the day, your donors they're going to donate to you because donating feels good. Helping people feels good. You give people the opportunity to feel good about doing something, whether it is for a mission they support, an organization that they love, if it's a museum that they visit every year, you're giving them an opportunity to feel good about doing something. And so your messaging needs to follow that up. And it really needs to show that it's positive, that despite current events, we're soldiering on and we're going to get to the other side of this. The other thing that's really important for 2020 is that your messaging is authentic, it's honest, it is showing why the need is immediate, and really, really just straight talking to your audience. This is hard. Life is hard. We've got to work together to figure this out. Come with us. Be part of the solution with us. And people who are doing that right now are going to get a lot of great donation success. Tip number 4, planning your stewardship in advance. And we have a whole section on stewardship. So I feel like I've touched on this, so I'm going to slide through this slide fast. But remember, your holiday giving donors this year are extra special, as I've said a few times. So you want to treat them as such. This year, unlike any other year, it is time to roll out that red carpet. And I talk to a lot of people who have donor stewardship plans, or they say, donor stewardship plan is something that is in the works for us, but we just don't have time. And if you do nothing else, I think for this holiday season, my takeaway would be create a stewardship matrix, like we're going to talk in a second, and execute that matrix for 2020. And see the success that comes from showing donors the love. And just as a little in advance spoiler note, you see here, phone calls, handwritten notes, actual, when you can, one-on-one conversations through viral, or maybe it is if you are in a place where you can meet, for coffee or something like that. These are all really, really important tactics. These are old school tactics, or I would call old school tactics, but they're necessary for 2020. And then last but not least, set goals, track progress, and celebrate success. So here is the deal for 2020. And if you're on this call, it's likely that you are a fundraiser just like me. And this has been a really tough year for fundraisers, for our industry in general, and for a lot of industries, to be very honest. And right now, when times are about to get really fast, you're about to enter a NASCAR race. That's crazy. It's loops, and it's a lot going on in a short amount of time. But we have to remember that the staff that you work with are, doing the best that they can in the environment that we live in now. So if you are somebody who manages staff members, if you're somebody who manages a team of fundraisers, celebrate success in every opportunity you get. maybe this is setting weekly goals versus your overall goal and working towards that goal as a group, breaking it down to weekly, daily, whatever it is. Host your weekly huddles with teams and really just bring them together for a high five session, a we got this, we're going to be able to do this, we're doing great stuff moment. As a team, also highlight positive things that happen and then talk through challenging situations because there's always going to be one. But most importantly, support each other. As I said, being a fundraiser is hard on a normal day. Being a fundraiser in 2020 is really, really difficult. And without setting goals, tracking progress, and most importantly, celebrating the success, or with that, you're going to see a staff morale rise and a really, really positive results as as a staff member coming together to reach goals. So celebrate with each other. All right. I said we were going to talk about stewardship a little bit more, and here it is, making holiday connections that last. I love this very simple graphic, and I laugh because maybe somebody wouldn't want to be my friend this long, but this is how I look at friendships. The circle is round, it has no end, and that's how long I want to be your friend. I'm not sure. Is that Winnie the Pooh? If you know, go ahead and pop it in chat because it might be Winnie the Pooh, but whichever one it is, I love this. I think that this is such a sweet, sweet way to describe friendship. And in fact, it's how we want to look at our donors. If we want a relationship that has no end and continues to be awesome for many, many years down the line. So a lot of you are really probably familiar with the donor cultivation cycle. And if you work in a marketing department, you know how much money is spent on finding and cultivating and turning people into donors for your organization. It's a whole process. You work on it all year round, and creating that inward funnel is really important for you to maintain the longevity of your mission. But now that because you've worked so hard to get people into the funnel, when somebody donates, not stewarding them or not creating that lifelong friendship is a missed opportunity to turn somebody who's given to you once or twice or maybe on a low level into that superstar supporter. So you should really look at every time you get a new donor, that's an opportunity to create an unending circle of friendships. So how are you going to do that? Stewardship is the answer. I have worked in nonprofit fundraising for a really, really long time, and I started before the days of email automation and maybe even CRMs. I'm not even sure what the first CRM I ever used, but I knew as my job that the donors that I was responsible for, the fundraisers that I was responsible for, it was my 100% job to make that person love the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. And if I spent all day doing that, I was spending all day doing my job. And so I'm a huge fan of stewardship and actually creating stewardship plans for your organization. Remember when I kind of back there said stewardship is going to be really important for 2020? It is. And here is a great way to sort of plan out what you're going to do for stewardship in advance and then use it to be executed by staff members. I don't know if you can see, I think you can see the wording on here. It was a little bit small. The wording necessarily doesn't matter. What is being done on the top, this is what this sample organization has decided to do. But here's what's important. You see over here that they're segmenting their audience. Monthly donors up to $10, and then one-time donors up to certain amounts. But what I love about this is it looks a lot like a sponsorship package if you are a person who creates sponsorships, but it basically just shows at what level of giving you are going to receive back in stewardship from the organization. So obviously the lower levels, these are the first couple are normal everyday activities that you do. You send an acknowledgement letter, you have a new donor welcome series, and then you send them a print newsletter and you keep them involved. But obviously, what you'll notice is people increase in the amount that they give. What they get in return is even more specified. Things like personal emails, a small gift or token of appreciation, or a phone call, maybe as you get up in the higher, maybe it's a phone call from your CEO. And so these are the types of things that you need to be looking at when you do your stewardship for 2020. All these little things, the personal emails, the personal calls, the opportunity to maybe send a thank you video to a top donor. These are really, really great moments of showing gratitude that will take not too much time, but will really, really pay off dividends. Because I'm such a fan of stewardship, actually, I have another slide, the big list of ways to steward a donor. And I probably could make 7,000 slides of these because there's so many ways. But if you are curious, if you're somebody that says, hands up, I want to create a stewardship matrix, but I don't know what we would put in there, this is a great place to start. There are a lot of fun opportunities on here that are multimedia. So obviously saying thank you is very easy. A thank you video would be really cool too. A sharing stories of hope when somebody gives at a specific level, that is a really, really easy way to steward them. If you are an organization that uses celebrities or influencers, maybe you want to have an influencer do a shout out to specific donors on specific days. Use them in that capacity to help them with stewardship. Donorversaries are a great thing. I love celebrating somebody's donorversary, the first time they donated. And then that's a wonderful way to send a personal email or an automated series that says, happy donorversary. Do you want to do it again? And then I want to shout out here to utilizing volunteers to make thank you calls, because I think that this is something that I used to do when when my job was full-time stewardship. I knew as a staff member that it was going to be really hard for me to make the amount of calls that I needed to in a day, but I wanted to be able to say thank you. And so you always have groups of people that are willing to help you kind of do this. So whether it's a volunteer saying thank you, or whether it is somebody on social media sharing that love, a member of a social media army, it's a really, really fun way to do that stewardship. Like I said, I love stewardship so much that I could talk about it for probably an entire webinar. And definitely, I need to leave time for some question and answers. But I highly recommend and challenge you to, first and foremost, think about creating that stewardship matrix that really kind of highlights what you can do and when you can do it for people who give to your organization. And because 2020 is going to be that roll out the red carpet type of event, go ahead and pick a couple ways to steward, try it, and then email me and let me know how it goes. I love hearing good stewardship stories. Last section we have is ending 2020 with a bang. And I think that, one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we got through to you this year is that, Giving Tuesday is the start, New Year's is the end, but the middle of that NASCAR race is just as important as the start and the finish. And so don't forget about those pit stops. I think it's on the next slide. Here we go. Nearly 1/3 of annual giving occurs in December, and that is crazy. That's a lot of money. I think I saw the stat, this incredible stat on how much money is raised at the year end, and I don't want to say the number in case I'm not giving it justice or going too much, but it is a lot of money. And in fact, 28% of nonprofits raise the majority of their annual funds at year end. Heifer International was an organization or is an organization that is a great example of this. So their year end strategy, while it does kick off at Giving Tuesday and it does go through the end of the year, but it doesn't stop throughout. And in fact, the biggest days for holiday giving are December 28th, 29th, and 30th. And so making sure that your plan is a all out sprint to the finish from beginning to end is really important, and this is why. Using social for the final days of holiday giving, I find to be very helpful and beneficial because you can send reminders a lot easier. You can tug at the heartstrings a little different. And social media can take a couple of asks a day versus an email where you want to prepare your year-end email, but you might not be able to send it out as much. So when you get towards this 28th, 29th, and 30th, I really think that's when you should switch to social and go all out with the last couple of days and really don't stop until the clock stops. And in fact, I wanted to, just before we switched over, show you a few examples of ways that I have seen already some holiday givings come out that I find to be very, very resonating, and also really, really great captures of exactly what the organization does. But here you go. 60% of organizations make 1 to 3 donors touches in their year-end planning. So don't forget the power of your graphic design. Don't forget the power of your messaging, and really use it as much as possible, not just in email, but also in your social media following. So we went through a variety of stuff very quickly with 6 minutes left for question and answer. I hope we have some. Amy, is there any questions?
We do have a couple questions. And first, I just wanted to circle back on the question that you asked the group as far as who segments their audience. We did get a few answers. It looks like the majority of people want to segment, and some are currently segmenting. So I see some opportunities there.
I know. As I say, you want to segment? Give me a ring. We'll talk about your segments. And like I said, I just gave you a couple great ones to start with. Lapse donors are wonderful. Past peer-to-peer fundraisers or past DIY fundraisers, those are great people to get started with. And then also other people, other ways, volunteers, and people who give maybe their time for the organization or for the institution, but not money. Great places to start. Thanks, Amy, for sharing that.
Yeah. And our first question actually dovetails quite nicely with that topic.
Yeah.
And I think you kind of just answered part of it, but just to go into it a little bit deeper, this question says, based on what I've read, there seem to be many different ways to segment your audience. Do you suggest segmenting based on behavior over demographics, or are they equally important?
Great question. I didn't choose to cover this because I think we talked about this in another webinar, but I love this question. So obviously, there's a lot of different ways you can segment. And if you are new, since a lot of this audience wants to segment, but maybe hasn't necessarily done it yet, starting with the way that the person interacts with your organization is the easiest by far, because that lives in your CRM, that data. You can pull a report that says, show me anybody who hasn't donated in 24 months. Bing, bang, boom, that comes up. That's the easiest way to do it. But I don't want to discount psychographic segmentation as well. And then that goes back into kind of like when I mentioned earlier, lookalike campaigns and retargeting. If you are an organization that knows the psychographics of your perfect donor set, or even if you think you know the psychographics of your donor set, um, retargeting ads and lookalike campaigns on Facebook are great places to do that. That's a psychographic segmentation that works really, really well. But you don't necessarily have to. The one thing I will say about segmentation is a lot of people, or the organizations that I've worked in, we've gotten a little, when we get into the whole psychographic, or like the, what people do, who they are, male, female, age, et cetera, all great, totally great ways to look at segmentation. People get a little nervous that they're like, well, I'm not sure. Is that person really that person? And it's really hard to know. So I make a lot of assumptions with psychographic, but I would say if you're an organization just starting out, 2 or 3 segment sets, making them based off of past participation, that's winning in my book. That's a goal to celebrate with your team when you do it. Great question, though.
Thanks so much, Carly. We do have one other question.
Sure.
And that is about it sounds like it's about how crowded the online and social media spaces will be this year. And so with so many people choosing to do online campaigns, with in-person campaigns is no longer really a thing. How do you think that the e-com is going to go with so many inboxes going to each constituent, and how do you stand out in that crowd of organizations asking the same person for donations?
Yeah, that's great. That's a great question because it is true. I have a picture. Maybe we'll send it with. It's too quick to put it in the webinar. It's like this door that like has a bunch of mail coming at it. And that's essentially what I feel like Holiday Giving 2020 is going to look like. And when I say door, I mean, this is just because it's one, but social media, email, it is going to be the same. So this could be an entire webinar topic in and of itself, but let me give you a couple of tips that I think are great to stand out. One, personalization in your email chains, or in your subject lines. That is really important, and your system will let you do it right away. So inputting the person's name, or even there's tests around doing emojis or doing something to help your subject line stands out is really important. Again, I've sat on a whole session about subject lines one time, at a conference, because the subject line in and of itself can really, really help. And so that is one place to get really creative. The other is in your marketing, in your graphic design, whatever you choose, how to visually display your mission. Is really going to be what sets you aside. And this year, even more so than in many, many other years, it's important to look at that, to look at what you're sharing, and know that people are visually stimulated and they feel emotions through what they see. And so spending a lot of time with your graphic designer, or picking out a image and content that speaks to you and pulls at your heartstrings, is really, really important this year. And then the third thing, I will say is that there's going to be a lot of emails. Everybody, I mean, I think even we've hit sort of like email as junk mail most of the time now. We've been there for years, but like if you're like me, I open up my email in the morning and immediately delete 30 emails that I don't read just because they're junk. But if you can make sure your supporters love you, because again, they want doing something good for somebody else feels good. So remember that. And you're giving people an opportunity to do something for somebody else, and that feels good. So really, you're giving your donors the opportunity to feel great about themselves and what they're doing this year. And don't discount that. And really just make sure that how, you'll be able to stand out with your subject lines, maybe the way that you put your who the message is coming from, maybe a CEO or somebody high up in the organization, and then really make them feel good. And you'll rise above the crowd just because of that.
Excellent suggestions, Carly. Thank you so much. And we are at our full hour, so I think we'll stop there for the Q&As.
Yes, although I will for sure read the questions afterwards. And if you had a question that I didn't get to, I will email you the answer. That's super easy. I'm happy to do that. And really just want to say a huge thank you for spending this hour with us, because I hope that you are able to pull out a few actionable items that you can do for your holiday giving. If you have questions about your year-end strategy, please email me at carly@surrygroup.com. I am always willing to answer your questions or to set up a short conversation to talk through your situation. But I wish all of you a very, very successful holiday giving season. Surrey Group will be watching, will be cheering you on, and wishing just really, really positive final moments of 2020. So thank you, everybody. And hey, Amy, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much.
Have a great day, everyone. Bye.